the football season has been pretty much over since week 2. I think Georgia's been hands down the best team in the country by far. But after seeing Alabama today, it's all but confirmed that this is the worst Alabama team I've seen in years. That defense is bad. Arkansas looked like it was, they made Arkansas look like they were USC in '05. I mean, they were dicing a terrible defense. And Arkansas is a good team, but if you saw them today, they looked amazing. Like that offense looked like it was a awesome offense, which they're good. But Alabama's not good. Georgia is hands down the best team. Ohio State is comparable to Alabama. Alabama's probably slightly better. The SEC is better than the Big Ten, and Georgia's just a different level. I mean, let's crown them. Whoever's number 4 does not matter, and because Georgia's just the best team out there.
You were telling us right now to crown Georgia the national champion. It's over.
Oh yeah, it's not even close.
It's not even close.
I mean, Alabama is. It's over. I mean, next week Ohio State's going to run through Michigan.
Okay.
Because it's not. Tennessee wins the Big Ten, other than Ohio State. Ohio State and Alabama are comparable. You can just toss a coin at who's better than out of those two teams, and Georgia's about 14 to 17 points than either one of them.
How old are you, Emmanuel?
Any thoughts on that?
How old are you?
40.
You're 40. Okay. Well, so you've watched some college football. I guess you've been a college football fan for a while. Do you know how many times we've anointed teams as just being they're the national champion? I can count a dozen times that we've done this in the past, and those teams have lost. So I would rather just I hear what you're saying. I've said the same thing. I called Georgia the number 1 team in the country in February. So they were number 1 in my preseason rankings all that time and sent them to the national championship game myself. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but in terms of declaring it a done deal, I've seen way too much. I've been watching sports way too long and can sit here. We'd be here all night talking about teams that were handed championships that fell short. Yeah, and it can happen, but I can't remember a season. It's been years, even when there was super dominant teams, where the gap between the top team, which is Georgia, and everyone else, I mean, look at Michigan State today. That team isn't good, and it's won 9 games. I mean, it's a good team, but they're not. They rely too much on big plays. It's not, it wasn't obviously, as we saw, non-competitive. Michigan is going to be not competitive next week against Ohio State. They're going to get crushed. Wisconsin is a good team, but I mean, against Ohio State, they'll do nothing. Alabama was the one team that could give Georgia a fight, but as we saw, Alabama is not the Alabama of last year even. It's not, they're good enough to win the West in a year where LSU's down, where Florida's down, where Auburn's down, where, Arkansas and Kentucky are at the top. I think this has been one of the least competitive college football years in years. It's been one of the least competitive. I think it's been one of the most competitive.
Well, competitive amongst everyone except that top tier team. Georgia has just hands down the best team in the country, and by far. I mean, like I said, you can anoint them champs because there's even been years before where Alabama, they're going to win. But there'll be a team or two where you say, hey, it might happen. But this year, I mean, watching all the football and watching, I think the SEC's obviously down this year because of those. When LSU isn't there And when Florida isn't there and Auburn isn't there, the SEC is down, but it's still better than the Big Ten. You know, you have Iowa that has a good defense, a solid defense, but no offense. You have a Michigan State, you know, that we obviously saw. And you look at the Big Ten looks slow to me, with they compared to the SEC. Those offenses look slow. And Ohio State is a top tier team. But they're not going to compete against Georgia.
You're saying the SEC is better than the Big Ten, and you're basing that on what?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I'm basing it on watching football, the eye test, obviously, but we saw Auburn and Penn State, right?
Yes.
And Penn State has been competitive against everyone. And we're looking at Auburn now, right, in the SEC. They're, second to last place?
But they are competitive against everyone.
They're competitive.
They've been competitive
but
against,
I mean, yeah, they're not a bad team,
Texas
but
A&M,
I mean,
etc. They beat Ole Miss.
Yeah, I mean, in that tier of like I said, with LSU being down, with Florida being down, with those teams of this year, they'll be competitive, sure. But I mean, if you put Auburn right now with Georgia, it's going to be a 30-point game.
Yeah, but you're talking a lot about what would happen. They did play. It was 34-10. It wasn't a overly competitive game, but it wasn't any kind of an annihilation by any stretch. But I'm going to let you know that I think the SEC is the best conference, just more based on what I believe to be valid about the recruiting rankings and the NFL draft selections, and I haven't seen anything on the field that would negate that. But based on what I've seen on the field and based on the results on the field, there's really no way to distinguish that the SEC did not have a dominant performance overall outside the conference. They just didn't. I think they're 6-5 outside the conference against the other four conferences. So they didn't play that well against some pretty marginal competition. You know, they played Miami and UCLA and Colorado and North Carolina State and Louisville and Pitt, those kind of teams. And they were not dominant in those games.
It hasn't been like I said, it's a down year for the SEC. It's still the best conference, but it is a down year. LSU, I mean, is last place in the SEC. They lost to UCLA. I think the only reason that the Georgia isn't crushing people even more than they already are. I mean, the defense is lights out. Their offense is good. You know, it's not amazing. If they had a really awesome offense, I mean, they'd be winning 63-14 week in and week out.
Well, we could say the same thing about Ohio really State. Good. We could say if Ohio State had an awesome defense, they would be the best team in America and they would be crushing everyone.
Yeah, it's possible. It's definitely possible. But I mean, that defense that Georgia has, no one has a chance against them. That's as good of a defense as you'll ever see. I mean, really enjoy watching Georgia this year because that's a defense that you may not see again for a while in the next, 5-6 years. This is an amazing defense. I mean, who do you think compares to that defense? Like 01 Miami or something like that?
Yeah, some of the Alabama defenses, 09, 11, Miami of 01, sure. Kind of difficult to tell just because there are a number of teams that just because of the style of plays, the style of play changing so much. And again, the chapter, this narrative on Georgia, and the completion of this season is so far away. Even though most of the games have been played, the three best teams they're going to play, they have yet to see. So they've played the fourth through the 15th best teams that they've seen. They're going to see the three best. So I would love to see. I agree with just about everything you've said. I've stated in different terms just about everything you've said in a number of ways for the past several months. But I've just watched way too much sports to be crowning champions, especially when the team has not played the three best teams that they're going to play.
Yeah, and I mean, anything can happen. And, there's been some years where, like, remember, what year was that with TCU and Baylor when neither of them went in? But I thought Baylor probably would have won the national title, right? I mean, there's some years that are just extremely competitive.
You think this Baylor year is just in 2014 would have won the national title?
Potentially, yeah. They were just lights out.
Yeah, I don't really see
that.
Or
even TCU. TCU that year, they were incredible. They had a real chance of winning it. They would have at least made it extremely competitive. But this year, I just don't see it being competitive. I think Georgia's just hands down the best. I hope I'm wrong. It'd be pretty fun to see them lose, but they're just that dominant. And like I said, I think the rest of I think next year hopefully will be more competitive. But from what I've seen, it's Georgia and everyone else.
So who do you root for?
I'm a USC and Arkansas fan.
USC and Arkansas. It's quite a combination.
Born in California, raised in Arkansas.
Okay.
So that's why I keep on cheering the Trojans to come back. And, because I when I moved back to California, it was in that era with USC was, the king, and that was their thing. Everyone said they're playing nobody, but you just saw them just destroy teams in and out, whether it was Washington, Stanford, or whatnot. Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, they were just but you know what? Oklahoma was really, really good that year. So they had, they faced competition. But this feels like one of those years, like when USC was that dominant. As far as Georgia goes, this is a special team.